The ancient Mayans were excellent astronomers, artists, and engineers. So why did the entire civilization suddenly abandon everything they built? Some things about the Mayan Empire still can't be explained. In 2015, a beautifully carved jade pendant shaped like a T was found in a tomb at the ancient site Nimli Punit in southern Belize. The fact that it's carved is rare in itself, but what makes the pendant invaluable to historians is the fact that they can read some of the inscriptions. One of the glyphs reads as wind and breath, connecting the pendant to the Mayan god of wind. Nearby sculptures dating to between 721 and 731 AD depict a king wearing the pendant. But a pendant of this significance would customarily be buried with a king, so why wasn't this one? Researchers are still trying to figure it out. They've deciphered some of the inscriptions, but the Mayan writing system is still not fully understood. Since a glyph explains the family tree of the king who wore it, UC San Diego archaeologist Jeffrey Broswell believes it was worn by a king who traveled far from the center of the empire to establish a new dynasty. This contradicts the accepted theory that the Mayans weren't politically connected across different cities, and if true, it could mean that the empire was very different than previously thought. What happened in 1000 BC that inspired the Mayans to transition from hunter-gatherers to permanent settlers? For years, scientists were divided into two groups. One claimed the Mayan civilization arose from a specific group unrelated to any other civilizations in the area, while others believed the Mayans developed from an older culture of Olmecs found in Mexico. The discovery of the ancient Mayan observatory found in Cebal in central Guatemala proved both groups wrong. The plaza and the pyramid at Cebal were built around 1000 BC, which makes Cebal the oldest Mayan settlement. But it's the complexity of the architecture and its influences that surprised archaeologists. Cebal differed from the La Venta site built 200 years later, which had previously been thought to be the oldest Mayan settlement. Excavations made it clear that the culture went through some kind of shift at the time, mixing together multiple civilizations' architecture, ceremonies, and other inventions. This indicates that Mayans were much more developed far earlier, but why? Scientists are still trying to figure that out, but in the meantime, these latest discoveries tell us that new civilizations developed through social interactions, not only on the ashes of what came before. The Mayans were masters of engineering, building their temples and pyramids sky high. La Danta, a steep pyramid deep inside the El Petén jungle in northern Guatemala, is even larger by volume than the famous Great Pyramid in Egypt, containing around 99 million cubic feet of material. Located in the ancient city of El Mirador, La Danta is one of the biggest ancient structures in the world, reaching over 230 feet in height. The Mayans built step pyramids, forming a terraced structure, but it's still unclear how ancient cultures managed to build such massive buildings and with such simple tools.
Most of the technology that we associate with big stone constructions were unknown to the Maya.
Richard D. Hansen, a scientist and the director of the Mirador Basin Project, did some calculations. 6,730,769 man-days of labor would be needed to transport the millions of cubic feet of material to the site of El Mirador, which would take 1,000 workers laboring for 18.44 years. All this just to gather and transport the stones. But the Mayans didn't use transport animals such as horses or the wheel, so it's a complete mystery how they actually did it. The Mayans had a habit of cranial deformation practice, flattening the skulls of young children to achieve a specific shape. The practice was more than just aesthetic, it carried religious and social connotations as well. There were two major styles, erect deformation and oblique deformation. The first was caused by placing a child in cradle boards to reduce his mobility. The second involved placing paddles on a child's head, which resulted in slightly different effects. When a Spanish missionary asked Mayan people why they did this, they replied that the gods instructed them to make them look better and to carry their burdens more easily. But as the civilization developed, the oblique deformation was limited to the upper classes of society, while the general population practiced the erect version. Some theorize that the oblique shape made the elite want to look like jaguars, sacred animals for the Mayans, or like the god of maize. And according to a report in the Journal of Neurosurgery, the flattening of the frontal bone is still practiced in some indigenous Mayan communities today. One particular ballgame was of major importance for ancient indigenous peoples, to the point where it's been documented from Colombia all the way to Arizona. Rules were adapted to local culture, but it was always played in an eye-shaped limestone paved court. In the case of the Mayans, the ball was hit with the hips, and penalty points were added if a player touched a teammate. At Chichen Itza, there's a stone hoop high on the wall of the court, but this was an exception. It was highly unlikely that a ball would bounce accurately enough to go through a hoop. Some researchers claim the game was linked to human sacrifice, but Christoph Helmke from the University of Copenhagen disagrees. He believes the confusion stems from the reading of the Popol Vuh, the Mayan creation myth, in which the game is played between mortals and the gods, with human sacrifice to follow. But there's much we still don't know, like what the game actually meant to the ancient Mayans, who was killed in the sacrifices that did happen, and of course, why.
The Maya were the best timekeepers possibly of any civilization of all time.
The Mayan calendar became more widely known in 2012 when some claimed it predicted the world would end in December that year. In case you missed it, it didn't, but it did open up a discussion on how the Mayans actually view time, even today, in a much more circular way than the Roman linear method. There are 3 wheels on the Mayan calendar, each turning under a different speed, making it one of the most complicated calendars ever discovered. The first wheel, the long count calendar, is the slowest. The previous long count period lasted from August 11, 3114 BC to December 21, 2012. The second wheel, the Hab, or the civil calendar, lasts for 365 days, separated into 20-day units. And the third, Tzolk'in, the time of gods, moves much faster. It lasts only 260 days, split up into 20-day long months. But there's more. The date August 11, 3114 BC isn't the date the calendar was written. It's meant to be the birth date of the universe itself, when the Earth was created. Until recently, archaeological findings supported the theory that the calendar was in use since between 150 and 50 BC. But recent excavations from San Bartolo, Guatemala show the calendar was in use at least 150 years earlier. The jungle can be thick and impenetrable, which means that for a long time, scientists believed ancient civilizations in Central and South America were much smaller, restricted to specific areas. They saw the ancient cities they found spread across the jungle as individual settlements, not a connected society. Then LiDAR technology, that's a new laser system which scans the ground to reveal what's underneath the greenery, was used to explore the dense forests of Latin America.
LiDAR is actually God's gift to the tropical archaeologist because you can tell the computer, get rid of all the forest, get rid of all the jungle.
When a group of researchers, including the director of the Middle American Research Institute, Marcello Canuto, used LiDAR to scan the El Petén jungle in 2018, they recorded over 61,000 ancient structures across the Maya Biosphere Reserve. That number is way higher than anyone ever imagined. And it means that the urban plan was constructed for millions of people. But it wasn't just the number of structures that surprised the researchers. The ancient Mayans built a vast system of roads and highways connecting thousands of their cities. The scans also reveal a complex water and terrace system, signs of a developed agricultural society. They even built defense walls and fortresses. Scientists previously estimated the Mayan civilization to be around 5 million people, but they now believe that number could be somewhere between 10 and 15 million. In 2020, also with the help of LiDAR, a giant platform named Aguada Phoenix was found, the earliest and largest known monumental structure constructed by the ancient Maya. It was discovered in the Tabasco region in Mexico and is even bigger than El Danta, containing somewhere between 113 million and 150 million cubic feet of material. The structure is over 1,300 feet wide and nearly a mile long, reaching 30 to 50 feet high. But it's not just how big the platform is, but when it was built. It was constructed sometime between 1000 and 800 BC, during the pre-classical period, similar to buildings in El Mirador and others. This means the Mayans of the pre-classical period were far more advanced than previously thought, turning theories about how the ancient Mayans evolved upside down. Some researchers believe the Mayans evolved out of older Olmec civilization, but the age of the platform rejects this theory. There are at least 9 large roads spreading out from the Aguada Phoenix platform into the landscape, indicating the platform could be the center of a bigger complex, but what it was for is still a mystery. Believe it or not, there are those who speculate that the Mayans may have crossed the Gulf of Mexico and settled in Florida. Several archaeological findings support the possibility, as ancient cultures often connected with each other through trade. Ancient settlements near Lake Okeechobee show evidence of corn agriculture, which could mean the presence of Mayans. The remains of the northern crested caracara, a type of falcon important to ancient Central American cultures, were also found in the area, and given the birds don't migrate, it's believed the Mayans brought them over. Lime debris, a fairly unique material often used by the Mayans, was also found at the site. Then there's the Crystal River site near Tampa St. Pete, a settlement dating back to the time of the classic Maya civilization. A stepped pyramid was discovered there, in the same size and made of the same material as the one in Tabasco. Some pottery decorations were also similar to iconography found in Central America, depicting the planet Venus and a diving bird deity. Several pyramid structures also existed on the island Key Largo, although they aren't there anymore. All that remains is a description from 1985. A report written by the Smithsonian in the 1930s described the settlement in temples. Sadly, most of this ancient archaeology was destroyed in the 70s and 80s. When the Classic period ended sometime between 900 and 1100 AD, the Mayans abandoned the majority of their cities in the area of today's northern Guatemala, Honduras, southern Mexico, and Belize. It happened abruptly. They moved out so fast they left unfinished projects behind. But the Mayans didn't vanish into thin air. They left behind their big urban settlements, but continued to exist in smaller groups across the countryside. Their descendants remain in Mexico and Guatemala, scattered throughout remote parts of the two countries, and continue to keep the Mayan tradition alive. There are several theories about why the Mayans left their cities, the most popular ones being overpopulation, our old pal climate change, or political instability. Charles Golden from Brandeis University theorizes that climate change could have caused drought and other catastrophes, preventing the Mayans from growing enough food. But something else must have gone down to make them abandon everything. The climate change discussion was challenged in 2022 by Scott Fedek and Luis Santiago, two researchers from the University of California, Riverside, who proved that the Mayans knew over 500 edible plants, many of which were drought-resistant. When the Mayans abandoned their cities, they abandoned everything, including their sacred texts and other precious objects. Two human skulls were recently found in the Mayan city Pacbitun, that's in modern-day Belize. The skulls look like battle trophies, similar to those depicted in reliefs and pottery. Other artifacts found in the area further support the idea that there was some kind of war or conflict, and researchers believe it may have been a battle between new powers in the north and older dynasties in the south. But in a study published in Nature Human Behavior, geographer David Wall and Francisco Estrada Belli disagree. In fact, their findings tell us that violence and warfare were much more prevalent in ancient Mayan society than was previously thought. Evidence found in the ancient city of Huitzna in the El Petén jungle indicate that the city was burnt twice, long before the empire collapsed. Another piece of evidence, a symbol describing the burning, was found on other sites as well. The authors conclude that, as warfare was fairly common, it likely wasn't the reason for the society's collapse.
And it was not a war, because you find no traces of a war, no traces of destruction.
Alrighty, you've been waiting for it all video, might as well dive straight in. Some outliers actually believe aliens were involved. Got a feeling this isn't going to go in the direction you anticipated. You see, author Eric von Daniken is convinced that the Lord Pakal, the ruler of Palenque City, was transported to space, and that it's documented on the inscriptions and reliefs on his sarcophagus.
They are talking of visitors from outside. Of course, they call them gods.
And to make things even weirder, in 2011, the Mexican and Guatemalan governments claimed they possessed documents which could prove the alien connection. Those documents are classified. So we're not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.